ISO 201 is the international standard for a sustainable event. If you are part of the supply chain in the event sector, maybe a small business providing floral decorations, or a global event management company supporting international sport events, or a conference centre, ISO 201 is the international standard to use to demonstrate credible sustainability. To understand ISO 201, it helps to know a little about how an ISO standard is made. ISO is an independent, non-governmental international organisation with a membership of 167 national standard bodies. There are over 24,000 standards in the world. Standards are created to meet a market need in a specific area. In fact, ISO 201 was created to meet a need identified by the London Olympic and Paralympic Games because they wanted to demonstrate that sustainability had been considered at every point of the planning and delivery of the Games. National standards bodies collaborate with experts, for example, event professionals, people who have expertise in events or are in the event supply chain. And together they draft standards. So ISO 201 is a standard created by the event sector for the event sector. You might be wondering about what it means to implement ISO 201. How does it work? ISO 201 works by changing the approach to how you deliver your work. So at every decision point, you consider the social, economic, and environmental impacts and make your decisions based on optimal sustainability. For example, this could affect the suppliers that you choose to work with. ISO 201 is not a checklist of things you must do. Instead, it's a framework for changing your business culture to one which is sustainable and better for the future of your business. If you were implementing ISO 201, you would be planning time to identify the sustainability issues you are facing. You would be regularly engaging with people with an interest in what you're doing. You would have a policy, objectives, and a plan, and you would be measuring. For example, you could be using ISO 201 to support your Race to Zero commitment and measuring your carbon footprint. Or you could be considering your human rights, and that could be part of your company's objective, and you could be using ISO 201 to deliver to your company's commitments. It's hard to know in advance all the positive results that will come from changing your way of working to align with ISO 201. So you can expect unanticipated benefits. ISO 201 works strategically with other issues which will be key to the future of the global event sector, including advancing the consideration of human and child rights and safeguarding, expanding on other long-term benefits of events, such as advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, improving accessibility, and meeting the Race to Zero criteria. Now you have an understanding of the impact of ISO 201. Join the Positive Impact Ambassador community, and together we'll be creating an event sector that delivers human engagement in a sustainable way.
Well, hello and welcome everybody. Great to have you all here. My name is Anne Hayes and I am Sector and Standards Development Director at BSI, and I'm really excited to be your moderator today. Before we start, let me share some housekeeping for today's meeting. First of all, just so you know, this is being recorded. You are unfortunately all muted, but you will be able to ask questions in the Q&A box on the side of your screen. This is a CPD recognised webinar, so please request your certificate via the feedback survey following the webinar. If you have any problems, please ask our team via the Q&A function and they will be able to help you. Today's webinar will be recorded, as I've already said, and this recording will be used so that the global community of standard bodies, liaison and potential standard users can all access this content. At the end of the webinar, I will explain to you how you can listen again and access additional resources that will support your ISO 2012-1 journey. My role today is to guide us and keep us to time, which I can tell you is going to be quite a challenge, as there is quite a lot of content that we're going to try and get through today. And as already said, you can ask questions via the chat box. We may not have time, and we probably won't have time to answer all the questions today, but we do have the opportunity of answering your questions at a later date on the virtual engagement platform that is being launched alongside today's webinar and will be available to everyone to access until May the 22nd. At the end of today's webinar, we will share with you how you can access this platform, and in a few days' time, you will receive an email from BSI with a feedback form and other resources that we will reference during the course of today. So now we've covered the logistics, let's get started on the webinar. First of all, happy Earth Day, and what a way to celebrate Earth Day with the launch of the revision of ISO 2012-1 to 2024. A standard for event sustainability originally inspired by the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games and now revised in time to launch at the Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Later today, we will hear from our Olympic friends about how they will use ISO 2012-1 to 2024 to ensure event legacy. In fact, their support of the revision of the standard is a practical example of their commitment to legacy and the impact events can have in enabling change. The narrative on how to deliver a world-leading event is changing. Delivering a sustainable event, one that considers our climate, the human rights of our participants, and the legacy, is increasingly the focus of global governments, businesses, and event attendees. The revision of ISO 2012-1-2024 was possible due to the vital contribution from our friends in AFNOR, the French national standards body, Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and the numerous French experts, including many small to medium enterprises. Their involvement is a real-life example of how hosting a major event can inspire action that will leave an impact beyond this summer's Olympic and Paralympic Games. Today's webinar starts with a panel session that explores the potential impact ISO 2012-1-2024 could have within the context of how international standards could influence government policy and address the most pressing needs of our time, such as climate change. We will then turn our focus to the three key areas of the revised standard: climate change, legacy, and human rights, before ending today with opportunities for action relevant for anyone in the event supply chain or anyone using events as part of their engagement strategy, no matter the size of your company or the country that you operate in. Our intention is that today's webinar will give you an understanding of the role of ISO 2012-1-2024 in your sustainable event strategy, and that today we tell the story of the possible impact this standard could have on creating a sustainable future in the event sector and beyond. To expand on this point, I would like to introduce Sergio Mejia, ISO Secretary General. We're going to play a video now which may have a couple of seconds delay, so please don't go away.
Hello, I am Sergio Mujica, Secretary General of ISO. Thank you for joining me this afternoon as we launch a new edition of ISO's celebrated standard for sustainable event management. This year, the eyes of the world will be on the biggest sporting tournaments on the planet, the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and the high-profile climate summit COP29. These enormous events share one crucial feature. They will all use ISO 2012-1 as a basis for their sustainability efforts. However, this standard will also be used by countless small and medium-sized enterprises who make up the vast majority of the global event supply chain. ISO 2012-1 is truly a global standard. It helps event organizers of all sizes, for events of all types, put sustainability first. It addresses all three dimensions of sustainability: economic, environment, and social, at all stages of the supply chain. It also helps organizers minimize their impact, reduce their waste, and improve their efficiency, cutting costs in the process. This brand new edition is unique among ISO standards in promoting human rights, particularly the rights of children, We recognize that the treatment and working conditions of those involved in the preparation and running of events is as important as the event itself. ISO 2012-1 also supports policymakers worldwide as they take action to address climate change and improve people's lives. Indeed, by embracing the power of standards, we can enable events of all types to promote sustainability, advance the UN SDGs, and bring about real change. In this Olympic year, ISO 2012-1 sets the bar high and supports all event organizers in their quest for sustainability gold. This is something to truly celebrate together. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
It shows how high profile this standard is that we start this webinar with an introduction from Sergio. He spoke about the groundbreaking nature of this standard and what a difference will be made for future generations of children because this standard enables the consideration of their rights. Inspiring change on this level starts with the creation of a standard. Over 16 national standard bodies and 12 liaison bodies provided input into this revision. In addition, from input from experts from across the global events sector, ISO's strategic approach to the key sustainability issues shaped the content of the standard. I would now like to welcome Amanda Richardson to introduce the London Declaration and explain the impact of this declaration on standards development. And remember, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat box so that we can come back to them. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Anne. Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda Richardson. I am External Policy Director at BSI and the BSI representative to the ISO Technical Management Board. I lead the ISO work on London Declaration and the BSI programme of work on London Declaration too. It's wonderful to be here at the launch event for the revision of ISO 2012-1, which represents a wonderful, welcome evolution of the standard. Today, I'd like to briefly speak to the climate change aspect of the revised standard in the context of ISO's climate strategy, and in particular, the climate action commitment under the London Declaration. So in brief, the London Declaration was proposed by BSI to ISO at the end of 2021. And essentially, this posed a challenge to ISO to take positive climate action in our standards development activity through firstly integrating climate science in all of our standards, and we have a portfolio of over 24,000 I believe right now, and secondly enhancing the role of civil society and those most vulnerable to climate change in the standards development process. From this commitment, the standards transformation programme is underway right now to embed inclusive climate action as the norm in standards development. And many actions have taken place already under the London Declaration, and I'll just briefly mention three areas. Firstly, we've conducted the ISO and BSI level an external impact assessment on our full catalogue of standards to identify those standards that could be revised to have a more positive climate impact. Secondly, for those identified standards, we've taken an innovative approach to bring in climate advisors to provide recommendations to the relevant technical committees on how to revise the standards to incorporate climate science and generate a positive climate impact. Thirdly, I want to particularly highlight changes that have been made to all management system standards, such as ISO 2012-1, as a direct result of the London Declaration, and which you can see evidence in the new revised version of ISO 2012-1. So let's just unpack the reasons briefly for this. Over 2 million organisations worldwide are certified to management system standards, and so they have a huge use and therefore impact. The thinking of the London Declaration task force at the ISO level was that if we could embed climate considerations across all of our management systems specification standards, like 2012-1, we could promote a mindset shift in organisations in realising that climate change is relevant to their operational activities. So now all management system standards include a requirement on climate, and all organisations implementing any management system specification standard will need to determine whether and how climate change is a relevant issue to those organisations. So it's great to see this new edition of 2012-1 really leading the way here. And as mentioned, this is just one part of the broader climate strategy and climate actions being undertaken by the standards community. I have a very brief period, so I'm coming to the close now, but please reach out if you'd like any further information on the London Declaration or ISO's climate strategy in general. With that, I'll hand back over to Anne Hayes, and I think I've made it in the 3 minutes, Anne. Thank you.
Yeah, Amanda, what a shining light and example you are to us all. So thank you very much for the context provided. Sorry, my camera isn't on now, maybe it is. So thank you very much for that. Explains that ISO 2012-1 will meet future business needs. We know that regulations are increasing in the area of climate change, for example, with reporting requirements. We also know that ISO standards can be used to influence policy at the stages before regulation. Our next panelist I want to introduce is Cindy Parakill from ISO to explain how standards are used to influence policy. Cindy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to join you today on behalf of ISO to address this milestone that represents the collective effort of experts from around the globe united in shaping the future of the sustainable events industry. As Anne mentioned, this is a great opportunity for us to highlight how this international standard can support governments in delivering sustainable events. As we know, events play an important role in our modern world. From grand international conferences to intimate workshops, events wield significant influence, leaving lasting impacts that extend far beyond their immediate duration, particularly in the social, economic, and environmental domains. Organizing public events is a common practice in government affairs, which requires the mobilization of resources at a large scale. With governments committing to net zero and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and as pressure on public budget continues to rise, public events must demonstrate that public investments lead to public good and that sustainability is at the heart of these initiatives and activities. So this requires careful planning and execution, and this ISO standard, ISO 2012-1, provides governments with a trusted tool and a systematic way to integrate a holistic approach to sustainability in every decision point across the event supply chain, from planning to delivery, ensuring a lasting positive legacy for all involved. But more specifically, this standard can help governments in 3 ways. First, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. ISO 2012-1 is a valuable, trusted resource and a flexible framework that governments around the world can use to responsibly manage social, economic, and environmental impacts of their events. It was developed by experts from around the world in a transparent manner and is built on consensus. So by using this existing standards, governments can save resources and time. Second, by referencing the standard in public procurement policies, governments can incentivize suppliers to prioritize sustainability, and it also helps governments to mitigate risk, ensuring that careful action is taken to deliver on their net zero commitments. And third, ISO 2012-1 provides a global common language and a set of metrics to communicate a government's commitment to sustainability in a credible manner. It helps them engage with stakeholders and build trust with the public across borders. The previous edition of the standard has been used by governments to organize major events, including COP28, the G7 Summit, the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and most recently, the International Monetary Fund spring annual meetings were used for this as well. We hope that this new edition, and with stronger emphasis on social legacies and inclusivity, and with options to demonstrate conformance, will encourage governments to consider this standard as a catalyst for transformative change in their events and lead by example. So let me conclude by congratulating all who have contributed to the development of the standard and to the organizers of this event. Thank you, and back to you.
Great, thank you very much, Cindy. I really loved your point about common language. Actually, I think that's one of the beauties of standards, so really appreciated you making that. So now we're clear that this standard could have a strategic impact with government and businesses, and the context for its creation includes addressing the world's greatest current challenges like climate change. But in practice, what does this really mean for the sector ISO 2012-1 was created for? To address that question, I turn to Fiona Pelham, who was chair of the project committee 250, which actually did the work. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Today is Earth Day, and it's the day where we can remember that despite different opinions, cultures, lifestyles, we humans have more that unites us than divides us, namely our shared home, Earth. When we meet, we collaborate, we engage, we interact, and this is how we build empathy, trust, and compassion, everything that is needed to create the solutions for the challenges of our time, including climate change and human rights. As chair of the project committee for ISO 2012-1-2024 and CEO of a not-for-profit which for 20 years has provided support and inspiration for credible action on sustainability, I definitely believe human engagement is vital. Since its launch 12 years ago, ISO 2012-1 has steadily become the framework used when governments, corporate brands, and globally known events want to demonstrate credible action for sustainability, as Cindy so clearly demonstrated for us. Considering your event's carbon footprint, resource use, inclusion, and accessibility is now expected practice. So how will ISO 2012-1-2024 create a new narrative for events? Firstly, the revised standard has the potential to shift thinking from event logistics to focus on an event's purpose within a global context. For example, in section 4.1, understanding the organisational context, that now includes determining whether climate change is a relevant issue. Of course, climate change is a relevant issue for events, both in terms of the emissions impact an event can cause, but also the impact a weather can have on events. For example, decreasing snow for ski sports or increasing wildfires impacting outdoor festivals. Secondly, this standard supports the important narrative that events enable the human engagement needed to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. For example, in 5.2 policy, users now have an opportunity to include a 3 to 10 year vision based on the long-term sustainability objectives of the organisation. This alignment of event activity with corporate sustainability focus will mean heads of sustainability will include events in their mandate and use this standard to shape event management processes in line with the corporate sustainability strategy. Finally, this standard gives the event sector opportunities to show leadership. For example, in 7.4 communication, users shall ensure that no communication is made that misleads the public. In a time of increasing regulation on sustainability claims and reporting, this framework will build trust so that the event sector can create that trust with clients, event attendees, partners, sponsors, and suppliers. ISO 2012-1 is the foundation for the narrative that events enable participation and inclusion so everyone's voice can be heard. And this is how we'll address the challenges of our time, because with connection and engagement, we'll build trust, compassion, and empathy. And with that, anything is possible. Anne, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you to Cindy and Amanda, who might want to put their cameras back on, because we do have time for one question, which was submitted before today's event, which really is what makes ISO 2012-1-2024 different to all the other event sector sustainability initiatives or general carbon initiatives. And actually, you've touched on that a little bit, Fiona, but maybe you could pick up on that, and then we'll go to Amanda and Cindy.
Yeah, so coming from the event sector, I can see there's an increasing interest in this area, and there's an increasing number of labels and campaigns and initiatives. And I think the big thing that sets ISO 2012-1-2024 apart from that is the credibility it has. And I'll hand to Amanda and Cindy to expand more on that credibility with their ISO background. So maybe Amanda?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. And yes, I think some of it's already been mentioned perhaps in the video and also with Sergio's introduction. But I think what's really critical and sets ISO 2012-1 apart from any other scheme or framework or reporting piece within the events industry right now is, as has already been mentioned, ISO is a global member-based organization with over 170 countries represented and engaged in the standards development process. We follow quite a rigorous approach within the ISO environment to make sure all of our standards are globally relevant and market driven. Otherwise, they can't be developed in the first place. And I think the voluntary consensus-based nature of the standards development process really ensures that the voice of all of our stakeholders are heard throughout the standards development process. And in this instance, as has already been mentioned, this is developed by the event industry for the event industry, but that engagement that we have through all of our members means that all stakeholders are involved, all interested parties are invited to provide their input and contribute to the content of that standard. So I think that's something that really sets it apart. Thank you.
Cindy, let's go to you.
Thank you, Anne. And I think Amanda and Fiona have really covered it. So from ISO's perspective, Amanda really covered it well. Just to echo what she mentioned, it is this standard is a truly global standard. It can be used by organizations of all sizes and across all industries. So I think that's an important point to make. The standards that we develop are in line with 9 principles, where we've put transparency, openness, impartiality, consensus, relevance, coherence, development dimension, and stakeholder engagement at the core, and that is a key part of our standards development process. And finally, our members are a key component to this equation. When a standard is being developed, we invite all 171 members to contribute to the development of the standard to make sure that all voices are heard and that the standard can be used globally. And the national mirror committees and the work of our members is so important to engage with the diverse stakeholders and to prepare that national input. And this makes it truly a global standard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy.
If I could say one thing to wrap everything up there, today isn't about saying that ISO 2012-1/2024 is easy. It's about saying it's credible, it's what's needed for the future, and there may be easier first steps to take, but what we're talking about today is how this will make your business fit for the future.
And I think building on that, Fiona, the key point that you said in what you said earlier was really around the business planning and the taking things forward over a number of years. It's not just a let's just do this quick so that we can tick a box. It's about consideration and it's about enabling businesses and events to progress. So I think it's really strong. And actually, when I think about how the standard has been developed, some of us on this particular part of the call have been involved in this for a very long time. Actually, it's quite dramatic, the changes that we've seen in the sector, but also that being reflected in the standard is truly positive. I do just one quick addition, because we've got 1 minute, so you've got less than a minute to answer, Fiona, but do you think it's confusing for people having lots of different carbon initiatives? Do you think that's a problem, or do you think the standard helps in that? So you've got 30 seconds to answer that.
The standard definitely helps because it gives you a framework, a way of working, and also because of ISO's action that they're taking in this area, which Amanda very clearly explained. I think every sector has this challenge right now. There's a billion carbon initiatives coming out in every single sector. So I think implementing an ISO standard and amending your ways of working to align with it is definitely the best first step.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And so Fiona, Cindy and Amanda, thank you very, very much. Don't go away too far, but really appreciate what you've contributed so far. So we'll now turn our focus to what the revision of ISO 2012-1 could mean for standards users. These panels have been created to include a broad representation of what it takes to make a standard, which is sustainability expertise, event expertise, different country input, and small to medium enterprises, as well as major events. I'm happy to hand over to my colleague Shana Gallagher, who from BSI's Net Zero Policy team, who have led on the Our 2050 World initiative, who will facilitate the next panel. Shana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm so pleased to be here. And yes, my name is Shana. I am the Net Zero Engagement Manager here at BSI and help to lead on the Our 2050 World project, which is convened by BSI, but is a collaboration between ISO the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, and the UN Race to Zero. And our 2050 World developed and then launched at COP27 the ISO Net Zero Guidelines, which are the first framework within the entire ISO system that defined not only net zero, but the principles within a credible path to achieving it. And so seeing the new standard ISO 2012-1 has been a massive accomplishment within the overall journey and collective pursuit of net zero by 2050 or sooner, and is a massive leap forward in terms of our collective abilities to address the climate crisis. So my role over the next 15 minutes is to introduce today's panel and our esteemed panelists who will be answering the questions that many of you have in attendance, potential users of ISO 2012-1, and will want to know the answers to. So that important question is mostly at the top of our minds: what does the increased focus on climate change in ISO 2012-1 mean for standard users? So let's start with Ulrika Martinsen, who leads the Danish working group and represents a small to medium enterprise, otherwise known as an SME. Ulrika, what do you think the increased focus on climate change in ISO 2012-1 will mean for standard users?
So it's an honor to be here. Reference being an SME in the event sector and working as an advisor on ISO 2012-1 and the Race to Zero, I firsthand experienced the fact that none of this is easy for an SME. But ISO 2012-1's increased focus on climate change make the standard even more relevant for the users for at least 3 reasons as I see it. Firstly, it's a way for event professionals and organizers to show leadership when it comes to taking action around climate change. And this is crucial because climate change is a key concern for both policymakers, business partners throughout the value chain, and customers. So it's also a unique possibility to put yourself in a position where you can advise your customers on what to ask for in terms of sustainability and how to prevent climate change. I mean, let's be honest, not that many clients know what to ask for. And last but not least, you can do this resting assured that your approach is dependable. ISO standards are recognized as credible because of the consensus building approach that we just heard about, but also the leadership they show. For example, here in 4.1 in the addition of the line referencing that organizations shall determine whether climate change is a relevant issue in the given case, event, or company implementing ISO 2012-1. So this addition on climate change and net zero in ISO 2012-1 provides clarity, I think, to all of us. And on that note, I want to mention that there are many other carbon initiatives in the event sector, and during the working group meeting revising the standard, there was a suggestion that they could all be referenced. But the good thing about ISO 2012-1 and ISO in general is that it's credible, which means you can't reference any initiatives that are not credible. So in summary, as Fiona said, ISO 2012-1 is not about making sustainability easy, but being in credible action and knowing that ISO is aligned with the big changes in our times. And personally, I'm looking forward to leading by example here in Denmark.
Thank you so much for making those very important points. So the world's largest event on climate change is known as COP, the Conference of the Parties. And we are very fortunate today to have a recorded message from Chaya Kapilashwamy, Senior Operations Coordinator for the UN Climate Change Convention, otherwise known as the UNFCCC, and they were one of the instrumental liaison bodies in the revision of ISO 2012-1. So we will now play the recording of that message.
I'm Chaya Kapilashwamy. I'm Senior Director of Operations, as you mentioned, here at UNFCCC, which is the UN Framework on Climate Change Convention. And in terms of my role and involvement with the ISO 2012-1 standard, we here at UNFCCC are responsible for delivering the largest conference in the entire UN system, convening 198 parties civil society, and other stakeholders. This is, of course, our Conference of the Parties, COP. Here at the Climate Change Conference, we were honored to have played a liaison role in the review and revision of the ISO 2012-1 standards. I also believe our experience have made a vital contribution to this review, as our involvement also provides with the additional authority to influence COPs and host countries and other UN entities in setting sustainability benchmarks for their events. Our recent COPs have all used the ISO 2012-1 standard, and this enables our framework to have sustainability in all of our operations, despite the fact that the COP changes locations every year. This year at COP28, actually last year in UAE, we worked very closely with the host country to ensure that all facets of the conference incorporated the standard.
Great. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful to hear so much support for that standard from Chaya, so thank you. And our final panelist is Jane from the UN Race to Zero. Jane, can you explain to us what the Race to Zero is and what this standard update could mean for the users of the revised standard?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Shayna. So I'm thrilled to be here today on behalf of Race to Zero, which is the world's largest campaign rallying non-state actors around the world, from companies to financial institutions, cities, and healthcare, to take rigorous and immediate action to halve emissions by 2030 and ultimately reach net zero by 2050. As Shayna mentioned, Race to Zero works really closely with ISO, and that's to work towards enabling and mainstreaming the transition to net zero through standards. And as a multi-stakeholder umbrella initiative, Race to Zero is collaborating with many organizations across the climate ecosystem, including our official partners such as SBTI and SME Climate Hub, as well as what we call accelerators, which are organizations that help build the capacity of non-state actors to reach their net zero goals. So Positive Impact, who is here today with us, is one of our fabulous accelerators. And we've been working really closely with their team to implement the campaign's criteria, which is known as the 5 Ps. So pledging, planning, proceeding, publishing, and persuading. Particularly, we have been working together on the latest 5th P criteria over the past year, really recognizing the significant role that events play in influencing standards to achieve net zero. As others have said before me, events are a really big part of our day-to-day work in pretty much all of our jobs now, but definitely in the climate space, especially being part of an international initiative like the Race to Zero campaign. From regional climate weeks to virtual convenings, and of course, COP, as Kaya said, one of the biggest in-person conferences around the world. There are so many opportunities for our community to influence the event sector. We've already seen nearly 200 organizations in the event sector supply chain, from venues to caterers, the list goes on, have made a Race to Zero commitment. So now with ISO 2012-1, we have an opportunity to make this impact even greater. For example, as a Race to Zero community, we can work to green our many events by choosing new suppliers for our events that use the new ISO 2012-1 standards. And we also have the opportunity to use our collective voice as climate leaders to work towards making sustainable practices attainable for all organizations, especially with the SMEs facing certification costs and other challenges. So following the launch of the revised guidelines, Race to Zero is really excited and looks forward to working with you all here today to support our community and learning how we can implement this in our work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jane and Ulrika, of course. Really, really appreciate everyone's answers and contributions. And we now have a question for our panelists, which has once again been pre-submitted. So the question is, there are an increasing number of carbon initiatives that exist. For example, offsetting travel or measuring event energy use and setting carbon reduction plans. So how will ISO 2012-1 help me as a practitioner to know the action I should take to address the carbon emissions that are associated with a given event? I can quickly come in on this in reference to the ISO Net Zero guidelines, which once again are the ISO framework that define the principles that are required to develop a credible path to achieving net zero. Those are principles for an entire organization. And so in terms of thinking about the life cycle, if you will, of an organization, obviously events can play a really important role in the emissions and therefore the net zero strategy of organizations that by necessity are all collectively pursuing net zero by 2050. And so having the ISO net zero guidelines as a framework for organizations over a longer period, but having then ISO 2012-1 for the shorter period considerations of how to credibly achieve net zero is really crucial to ensuring that we have high ambition, high integrity frameworks in place for the most purposeful and relevant, appropriate timeframes in charting our path to net zero. So Jane and Ulrika, if you're back with us, if you could share some thoughts on this, please do weigh in. The question once again is, how will ISO 2012-1 help practitioners to know the actions that they should take to address the emissions from their event?
I think part of this is it links to international credible organizations like the Race to Zero campaign. And I know it's a really crowded ecosystem of knowing where to begin the sustainability and net zero journey. But I think following where there's been agreed upon international consensus, as we've talked about through this webinar, is a really great starting point. And that's something that the Race to Zero campaign has been a part of too. And so I think looking up to these leaders in the ecosystem and becoming a part of these big growing umbrella initiative movements is a great way. And so you can learn more about the Race to Zero and our criteria and how we work with these other international organizations and standard setters around the world to really show what credibility looks like.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. Really appreciate it. And I will now hand the mic back to Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Shana and the team. Really appreciate all your input there. I know that some people had a few issues with hearing Ulrika's all of everything that Ulrika said, and we will actually, I think there is a note in the chat, but we will be ensuring that we re-record that so that we can issue that out to you all as part of the follow-up material, just because it would be a shame to miss it. So thank you. Obviously, climate change is a key issue which business is addressing today, and the panel clearly communicated that any events or members of the event supply chain using ISO 2012-1 will be taking credible action. It is obvious that events create a carbon footprint, and an essential action for the event sector is to be able to tell the story and demonstrate evidence of the good impact an event could have. The next panel will focus on this, and I'm really happy to hand to Romain Rubu from Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games, who was also chair of the working group and who will facilitate the second panel. So Romain, over to you.
Thank you, Anne, and hello everybody. I'm really pleased to be here on this webinar. Today we'll facilitate this panel. So the title is, what does the increased focus on legacy in these standards mean for the users? I am Romain Ribou. I am part of the impact and legacy team within Paris 2024, and I've been pleased to be the chair of the working group dedicated to this revision. And we collaborate with 16 national standard bodies and also 12 liaisons to collectively build this and write this new standard. So we'll be able to have detailed information of what this standard means for legacy. There is a recording session that you will be able to watch after this webinar. But today I will introduce our two guests for this panel, and they will answer to this question. So what does increased focus on legacy means for the users? And I'm pleased to ask the first question to Tanya Braga from the IOC. She's the head of the legacy within the IOC. So Tanya, over to you. Explain us, what does these standards mean in terms of legacy?
Hello, Romain. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. the IOC has participated in the revision of ISO 2012-1 2024 as a liaison. And just before talking about the importance of legacy in this revision, just to remind you of our long-standing commitment with ISO 2012-1 and why we embarked on this adventure of reviewing the norm. I think there are 2 points that were mentioned today that for us are very important. One is to have a common language. As you may know, the Olympic Games are organized each time in a different place. And for us, it's really important to have this common language for sustainability. So we all have these bases to make sure that the Olympic Games are pursuing a more sustainable path. The second one that has been mentioned here is credibility, and to have an ISO standard that can guide all of us from one edition to the other in different parts of the world is important. And the third one is that we have a common way of working. So even in different situations, and different times, we can have this way to work that put us together. So we have been committed with the standard since the beginning, as it was created as a legacy of the London 2012 Games, based on that experience. And participating in this revision of the norm was very important for us. There are many things here. I think we had 4 objectives in the beginning, and enhancing legacy aspect was one of them. The other were to strengthen, bring some content on human rights, and I believe the next panel will talk about that. Strengthen everything that's related to social sustainability, and as well include some aspects related to accessibility and the rights to people of all abilities to participate in events. In regards to legacy, I think it was important for us to make sure that the events would not only be focused on the few days of delivery of the event, but that it could create opportunities for the people in the locations that host the event to create some different enduring results and impact. So it is about creating economic impact for the local population. It's about increasing the ability of an event to help create the conditions for people to acquire new skills and to share best practice and to try to do things in a more sustainable way. So for us, having legacy as part of the event was a way to make sure that the whole life cycle of the event would be taken into consideration, but also the enduring benefits for the hosting community would be at the heart of the event planning.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for this rich contribution. Now we will leave the floor to Pauline Tessèdre. So just to introduce her, Pauline she is the head of the French delegation. She's also the head of the French Mirror Committee. And so you have been contributing in this new standard from mostly the beginning, because together we would like to have a really large approach, not only focusing on large events, but also really something which is accessible and comprehensive for small and medium structures. And Pauline, you run 3 case studies that are also available online. Maybe it should be interesting for us if you can share the main let's say, results of this case studies, because the legacy is not something that is only for large events. It's also apply, as Tanya mentioned a bit, for small and medium structure and events. So, Pauline, the floor is yours to explain us what legacy means for small and medium structures.
Of course, thanks a lot, Romain, and hello everyone. It's a real honor to be here today to celebrate the revision of the norma. I am very, very glad to talk to you, everyone. First of all, an important vision on the theme of heritage allows us to broaden a vision in our company from 3 to 10 years old. As I am the president of the French Mirror Committee, we are committed to bring this notion of impact to our businesses, but first to be able to measure it, and then to work on how getting more and more positive impact on all day working. The theme of legacy, what was important for us is that to present first several business cases that have been done from French companies, small one and also bigger one. It's very important for us to work on the user-friendly topic on the norma. It helps, it's a real framework to input sustainability into your organization. And this is why I had, for example, 4 results. The first one is from an organizer of events, a congress exhibition, which is composed of 40%. Then I have a catering company composed of 20 people. The third one is a place, a venue who welcome events, cultural exhibition, and also sports competition. And the last one is stakeholders, an agency, a design and booth company. And what is very interesting is that the use of the norma really offers concrete results. Each company have worked on several chapters. I can tell you that there is a 10 chapter at the whole in the body of the norma. And we had several chapters where we work on it. The first one was the communication. Then the second one was the leadership. That helps every day to bring and to involve people in your sustainability development. And the 2 other one was all the planification and the intern audits. And the result is that it really helped French companies to understand, to measure, and to feel that it really gives the perfect framework in terms of legacy, which is the topics that for French company is not very easy to take care. But when you want to work and when you want to improve yourself, it's possible. And this is why I was very happy. And it's a great, I'm very proud of the French community. They were here from the beginning, always working and paying attention to help everyone. So it was a great moment for all the French company to work on this revision.
Thank you very much, Pauline, and thank you. And I think that we heard that, and we understand that legacy can be from a few months, few days and few months after the event or after the structure that you organize, and until a few years later. So it's depend of the size of the structure and size of the event, and it's also could be local or global. So it's the way that we think this new standard to really fit to the whole event sector and not only to the large events. So thank you for that. Now I will ask the panel a question submitted before today's webinars.
Oh, I think we may have lost Romain there. Apologies for that. Having a few technical issues with connection today, it seems. So sorry about that. We'll move on to the next section, and if we can, we'll come back to that question towards the end. But thank you to Romain and the panel. Demonstrating legacy is a way to future-proof the events sector, and ISO 2012-1 provides the framework so this can happen. As we heard earlier from Sergio, the Secretary General at ISO, an area of significant legacy an event could leave behind is improved human and child rights. And I will hand over to the head of the UK Mirror Committee, who also represents a small to medium enterprise, Emma Wellman, who will facilitate the final panel. Emma, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Anne. And just before I start with my panel, I just want to say how nice it is to see Romain and Pauline and Ulrika and all the other people who were part of the revision of the standard. I can't believe we got through all of that so quickly. It was difficult at times, but it's amazing to be here now talking about the revised standard. My name is Emma Wellman, Companies to Implement. I chair the UK Mirror Committee and have been involved in the development and also the recent revision of the standard. I think of all the changes made in the revision, I am probably most proud of the inclusion of the content on human and child rights, which has been a result of a lot of hard work by the committee and the UK experts. I would also like to encourage all event professionals to get involved with a Mirror Committee. It is only by being involved that we can actually make sure that this standard works for all of us who want to implement it. So please get involved. I've done a longer interview which can be found on the engagement area explaining how you can do this. Now, my role today and over the next 15 minutes is to introduce today's panel, who will be answering a question that many of you attending and potentially one will want to know the answer to, and that is, what does the increased focus on human rights in 2012-1-2024 mean for standard users? So let's start with Alison Biscoe from the Centre for Sport and Human Rights. I'll hand over to you, Alison, now.
Great, thank you, Emma, and thank you for having us. It's great to be here. Just by way of quick introduction for anyone who maybe doesn't know what the Centre for Sport and Human Rights is, we are a human rights organization for the world of sport. So basically what that means is we work with all actors in sport, sport bodies, event organizers, but also corporates, civil society, and we help them to apply international human rights principles to sport. So it was really important for us at the Centre, but also for all of our members to be involved in this process, because as we've heard throughout this webinar, there are so many events, including many major sporting events, all the latest editions of the Olympics, World Cups, Commonwealth Games that use ISO 2012-1 to guide their sustainability commitments. But I think it's fair to say that in previous editions of the standard, explicit reference to human rights was maybe a little bit lacking. That was, I think, to be expected. The standard was first developed in 2012, whereas the sort of go-to standard on business and human rights, called the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, were only adopted in 2011. And at the time, they were not at all implemented to the same extent as they are today. Fast forward to now, and I think the field of business and human rights more broadly, but also its application to the world of sport and to events more generally, has matured significantly. FIFA, for example, was the first sport body to publish a human rights policy in line with the UN Guiding Principles in 2017. And since then, several others have followed. The upcoming Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games will also be the first multi-sport event to have human rights integrated directly into the host city contract. So the sports and the events landscape has evolved, and it was really important that ISO 2012-1 reflected that evolution. So what were the main changes then, at least from a sort of social and human rights perspective? First of all, I think the updated standard now includes explicit reference to the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And this was critical, not only because of the UN Guiding Principles standing within the human rights community, but also because I think it's fair to say that human rights due diligence processes can often differ from sustainability management processes. And so there was a need to create greater alignment between these two systems and to bridge the gap a little bit. And ISO 2012-1, I believe, was the right place and the right platform to do that. The second main change from a social perspective was that reference to social impacts has been added to many key definitions in the standard. These include definitions of areas like sustainable development, legacy, stewardship, amongst others. So there's a very clear and explicit reference that throughout all of these other things, you also need to be considering your social impacts. And what is included in the definition of social impacts has also been greatly expanded to include explicit reference to human and child rights, as Emma and others have referenced, but also what maybe falls under the umbrella of human and child rights. So things like labor rights, diversity, equality, and inclusion, right? These sorts of things are now defined as also being part of an event's social impacts. And the final main change, which I won't go into too much detail on because I'll let my colleague from UNICEF UK talk about that, but is the addition of a new Annex D on human and child rights that has been added to provide necessary guidance on how to align with these international human rights systems, such as the UN Guiding Principles. So to conclude, I think in terms of what this means for the human rights community, it will hopefully mean that event organizers will better consider and be able to better manage their human rights impacts around events so that we can all focus on what we really want, which is making sure that events have a positive and sustainable legacy and one that supports and reinforces the people and the communities participating around these events. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Alison. That was a really interesting changes that have been made to the standard. So thank you very much for that. As you mentioned, one of the key elements of the revision is the inclusion of an annex on human and child's rights, which was drafted by UNICEF UK. And I would now like to introduce you to Zara Grant, who will be able to tell us more about that. So.
Thank you, Emma. It's a privilege to be here, and it was a pleasure to work alongside you. Sorry, Emma. It's a privilege to work alongside you and the UK Mirror Committee on this as well. And great to hear from Sergio earlier and his emphasis on this annex and the inclusion of human and child rights. So UNICEF UK's work on the annex began around 5 years ago, following our work to advise the Sustainability and Legacy team at the organising committee for the Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games. We set out with the aim of addressing the lack of consideration for human and child rights across the global event industry and worked alongside the team at Positive Impact to draft guidance on embedding human and child rights into the event lifecycle. Our guidance was originally 54 pages in length, but you'll be delighted to hear that we managed to redraft the document down to the 5 pages that make up the annex as it exists today. So before submitting the guidance to the UK Mirror Committee for consideration in the review process, we spent a year piloting the guidance with several international federations and their events. We wanted to ensure that the guidance was going to be both accessible and relevant to the events industry and that it translated easily into real life events. We received really insightful feedback from the likes of Formula E, the Premier League, and members of the Advisory Council for the Centre for Sport and Human Rights, and secured pilot events with FIFA and the Commonwealth Games Federation. So the guidance was trialled at the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, for example, with UNICEF UK working closely with the organising committee in the run-up to and through delivery of the Games to follow how the guidance was being applied in real time. FIFA also piloted the guidance at 2 of their smaller tournaments in women's football. It's really important to demonstrate the applicability of the guidance to any sized event with differing levels of resources and capacity, and that applying a human rights perspective shouldn't ever overwhelm event organisers. We focus specifically on sport events in terms of piloting, as my team at UNICEF UK works on ensuring that children can participate in sport safe from harm. So that's the reason for the focus on sport. But our consultation process took on input from a variety of voices, and our engagement with the UK Mirror Committee in particular helped to ensure that this annex was applicable and relevant to all genres of events. We also invited human and child rights experts to comment on the guidance, which helped to ensure that the content was robust and contained all of the essential details around adopting a rights-based approach, even within the confines of such a brief document. So I'll just quickly pick some of the key terms out of the annex and give a quick overview of those, and reiterate just that we have set it out as straightforwardly and easy to use as possible. So it's not an overwhelming document. But first we look at engagement with interested parties, and it's a really crucial step for event organisers to take, and something that maybe plenty of event organisers are already doing. But it should take the form of continuous engagement throughout the planning, delivery and legacy of the event. So event organisers should consult with human and child rights experts and groups and individuals who are likely to be impacted by the event. And this can really work as a positive for the event organisers to help inform them and kind of how they're doing, provide feedback on what they're doing, and kind of equip them to ensure that their event does better, I suppose. Secondly, event organisers should conduct a human rights assessment. This will help them to identify potential risks to people and their rights, which may occur as a result of the event and its surrounding activities. Publishing a human rights policy will enable the event organiser to make a commitment to respecting and embedding international human rights standards throughout their event, and ensure that the entire organisation is bought in. The policy should assign responsibility to different individuals throughout the organisation to ensure that embedding rights is not just seen as a box exercise, but is carried out effectively. In the interest of time, I'll touch finally on remedy. In the event that event organisers contribute to or directly link to human rights harms, they're expected under the UN Guiding Principles on Business Human Rights, which Alison mentioned briefly earlier, to provide for or cooperate in effective remedy. And that remedy simply means making good harm. So it can take forms such as an apology, compensation or guarantees of non-repetition. There's a bit more detail on that in the annex, and again, consulting, I suppose, with experts is really useful as well to equip event organisers to do these things. So it's really important, lastly, just to build a culture to see the incorporation of human and child rights positively. Elements such as identifying human rights impacts and receiving reports will enable organisers to adapt and create future events which positively impact all. So thank you very much for listening to that brief summary.
Thank you, Zara. That was really good, and thank you for that explanation of terms. It can often be a little, you can be apprehensive when there's a new area that has been introduced to the standard if you're not really clear on it. So it's really great to get those terms explained. And I have to say, having read through all the annex, it is accessible, and even for SMEs, the company I'm working with at the moment are looking forward to implementing all the changes and making sure that it works for them. So it's not just for big companies. We have now got time for a question, and there was one that's been pre-submitted. And the question is, how will considering human and child rights practically make a difference to my event? And I'll put this one over to Zara quickly, and then we'll go to Alison as well, please. So Zara, how do you think considering human and child rights will practically make a difference to an event?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, and from a biased perspective, it can only enhance your event. By having an organisation that's bought into the human and child rights-based approach and listening to those impacted by your event and related activities, your event's going to have a stronger focus on people and be more ambitious, I think, for the future that's sustainable and positive socially as well. I think consumers of events are becoming increasingly aware of and kind of eager to see what is going into the making of an event, and they have a growing appetite, I suppose, for transparency and accountability from event organisers. And I think, yeah, using this annex to apply that rights-based approach will give event organisers a jump start in ensuring that those who come along to experience your event and those who find themselves on the sidelines have a positive and enjoyable experience that's safe from harm.
Lovely, thank you, Zara. Alison, can we come to you and just see what your thoughts are on how this will make, how considering human and child's rights will make a difference to people's events?
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question. I agree with Zara, of course, but just one important highlight I mentioned in my intervention that human rights processes can sometimes differ from sustainability management and other management processes. And one of the key differences is that looking at human rights risks is about looking at risks to people, not necessarily risks to your organization or to your event. And that's a critical but important difference. And yeah, in my opinion, is a difference that would enhance the event, because for the most part, these events are being hosted in communities. You know, we want a big part of legacy efforts is to ensure that these events have a positive legacy. They leave a positive legacy for the communities that are hosting them. And a critical part of making sure that that's possible is obviously by talking to and engaging with the people who are going to be hopefully the ultimate beneficiaries of the events. And so I think by having that people-centered approach, again, agree with Zara, that can only enhance events and all the other things that you're planning to achieve with your events.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for that, Alison. So I'm now going to hand back to Anne, who I think is wrapping up at the end of this seminar.
Great, thanks so much, Emma. And actually, you know, you and I've worked together on this for a while, and it's so great to see this part coming into the standard. So I'm really delighted about that. I'm just going to quickly see if Romain has been able to come back and join us. I don't know whether he's there. Just count to 3 slowly. 1, 2, 3. Romain, are you there? No. Oh, brilliant. I was wondering if you would be able to ask the panel, your panel, the question that you were going to put to them, because I think legacy is such an important issue and I don't want us to miss it. Would that be okay if we call your panelists back?
Of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll hand over to you again quickly because we've got time, so we can do it. Thank you, Pauline, as well.
So do you have the question?
Yes, if you could just tell everybody what the question was, because we missed that bit, and then go. Pauline and Tanya could perhaps respond.
Sorry. It's a question that I've been asked the few days before this webinar, right?
Yes, that one. That'd be great.
Yes. Do you have it? Because I'm sorry.
No, I don't. Pauline, do you have it? Pauline or Tanya, do you have it? I don't have it. I'm sorry.
I'm getting it.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Bear with us a second. Or Fiona, have you got it? Are you online?
Yes, so I have it if you want.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Romain was wanted to ask the panel this famous question. The concept of legacy can seem overwhelming. Where would you start? Where would you suggest we start?
Well, it can be a question for both of you, in fact. Tanya, do you have an
idea?
You
want to start, Tanya?
Yes, it's a very good question, and we often ask it if small companies and smaller events could work with that. I think every single event has the potential to create a legacy. And it connects a lot with what we've just discussed about this people-centric approach, and as well, I would say, place-centric approach. If the event could create any change, it could be a small change for a small event or a big change for a big event on the future of the places and the people who are hosting or involved in hosting the games. So it could be as simple as, for example, in the case of events that have volunteers, to get them to learn a new skill, or to improve a place like a public place that is hosted close to the event and make it more beautiful for the local users, or to share skills, or to bring awareness on different topics that are related to the event. I think the most important part here is to open a dialogue with those that are involved in the organization of the event, or also can be affected by the event, to understand how hosting the event could improve their lives and the places they live. They will have great ideas, so it's just to engage in dialogue and find win-win solutions that can be accelerated or implemented together with the hosting of the event.
Thank you, Tania. And what is your opinion, Pauline?
So my opinion on the concept of legacy that can be seen like overwhelming. We suggest to start from the beginning, which means to start to communicate with all the interested parties. Of course, you have to prepare your company and yourself to be ready to input sustainable policy with an action plan in your company. But maybe you could first start with interviews, because there is a lot of very nice best practice that exists in several industries, whatever you are and whatever the size of your company. And also maybe you could start by taking some advice from companies which are already ISO 20121 certified, and to communicate, to promote, to never stop the dialogue. And then you go step by step. You choose the way that you wanted to go, and to never forget that you need time to do things correctly. So don't be don't go too fast, and try to follow step by step the norma, and talk with everyone that the ecosystem can give to you some advice.
Thank you very much. I think that we have both processing and methodological approach, and also, let's say, an overall approach that can show that legacy can be really considered in the all aspects. So economics, environmental, social, it is really important. And thank you both of you for this these testimonies. It's rich. We can also understand that legacy, it's not only after the event, but it starts before the events. Since the day that you think about organizing your event, you can think about what should be the legacy of this event. You can have an impact before the event, and also after. And of course, it will depend on the size of the event that you are organizing. If you have a local legacy, it's already a good thing, and if you're a larger one, you will have a more global, at least national or global legacy. And it's what we would like to have in this new version of the standard. So thank you both of you for your testimony, and sorry for small problem with my connection.
I'm so grateful for you for coming back. So thank you, and I'm sorry to have put you on the spot. So really sorry that we weren't able to support you more in that particular moment. So thank you very much. And Pauline, I think your comment about going step by step is true across all the different parts of the standard that we've talked about today, because if you try and do everything all at once, it becomes a very difficult big problem, whereas planning and going step by step is the way to go. So thank you three very much. So I really appreciate that. Just moving on to the sort of closing part now. So I want to first of all thank all the panelists today, and actually all you people who have attended, because we have had some challenging issues on some of the technology, and I really appreciate you sticking with us. We will go back through it and make sure that if anything isn't clear, that it is available to you on the recording. I also actually just really want to thank all those who took part in revising the standard, because it's no mean feat to do it in a normal time frame, but to have done it in the way that this group have done it, to get it ready for the Paris Games, which is a huge achievement, and we're so proud that the Paris 2024 are following the standard, and really grateful to them for all of their support. If you're currently implementing ISO 2012-1, there is a transition period, so please don't worry. If you don't have to stop what you're doing and start again with the 2024 version. You have time to transition to the revised standard. So that's really quite an important message from this webinar today. Moving on to the logistics, we have noted all the questions that have been received today. Some of the content in the engagement area addresses a number of those questions that have been asked today, and we will be responding to the others. So please keep an eye on the virtual engagement area for that. The virtual engagement area opens from today until May the 22nd, which I said at the beginning of this. If you want to explore this area immediately, you can do so via the website of our collaboration partner, Positive Impact, and their website address is positiveimpactevents.com. Otherwise, you will receive an email from BSI within the next few days, which will include a link to access this engagement area. It also will include an executive summary on ISO 2012-1-2024, which we hope will be a useful resource to support everyone starting or progressing with your sustainable event journey. There are, from BSI, updated training products so you can build your capacity in understanding and implementing ISO 2012-1, and we will link to this in our follow-up email. And we will also share the feedback form and would appreciate your input on today's event. ISO 2012-1-2024 is a standard we at BSI are keen to continue to focus on, and in the near future we hope to see that this project committee may become an ISO technical committee, and additional guidance could be created. For example, guidance on legacy based on the learnings from the Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. How we engage as humans is something needed for us to collaborate and create the solutions for a future sustainable world. And ISO 2012-1-2024 is the opportunity for the event sector to be recognised for the leading role they have in enabling positive change. To support this future, we hope that today's webinar will be a resource used by all the national standard and liaison bodies involved in the standard revision. Thank you for attending today. Thank you for all the questions you've asked, and thank you for taking action to implement ISO 2012-1, because this standard is shaping the future of human engagement to meet the needs of our planet and communities. Thank you very much.